Welcome everyone to this week's Torah portion review. This week's Torah portion is called Pinchas, and it picks up right where we left off last week. Zimri, a Simeonite leader, had just taken a woman into his tent to sin. This was a Midianite woman. And Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood up among the people and committed an act of zeal. He killed Zimri and the woman, stabbing them both with a spear. So we start this week's Torah portion with the question of what exactly is zeal? Well, the rabbis explain zeal to be a certain passion. It's a strong emotion where you want to act for the sake of heaven, which is another way of saying you're acting solely for God. Now, zeal is not doing whatever you feel like for whatever reason, but it's an intensely focused and pure intention for the good. The Midrash explains that Pinchas's actions were 100% pure. That means that Pinchas had no intention whatsoever. He didn't do anything because he wanted honor or that he wanted fame. He didn't expect any rewards. He didn't expect any recognition. He didn't expect, like, let's say, a plaque or a certificate with his name on it. He didn't do it for any other reason other than because he wanted to stand up for the sake of the Torah or for the sake of God's instruction. However, not everyone was sure if what Pinchas did was the right move because remember, after all, Pinchas just committed murder. He just killed two people in the camp of the Israelites. So everybody was looking around like, whoa, it was a pause. Like, did did he really just kill two people? Well, doesn't that make this camp unholy? And so everybody started bickering. Everybody started, making up their theories about if he just committed, a grave sin. Well, the Torah says that in the midst of all this bickering and everybody was about to basically bombard and, jump Pinchas for what he did, it says that God himself intervened and he spoke to Moses saying, everyone is making up their own theories about Pinchas being right or wrong, but tell everyone that Pinchas and his zealousness is the reason I'm no longer angry with the people. Tell everyone that I am making a covenant of shalom, of peace with Pinchas. God promised a covenant of eternal priesthood with Pinchas, meaning that all future high priests would come specifically from his lineage, and this was his reward for acting solely for God's honor. Then we move on to the next chapter in the Torah that gives us another census. So this time we're numbering the second generation. Remember that after the sin of the spies, the punishment was that any man over the age of 20 would die in the wilderness. Well, now, 40 years later, everyone who had originally came out of Egypt had died, and only those who were under 20 or not even born yet, now they're here, present, preparing to enter into the promised land. The Torah also makes clear that the only people who were allowed to survive and make it into the promised land were Joshua and Caleb. Remember, these were the two spies that stood up against the rest of the spies when they gave a bad report. So this time, the total count of the Israelites came out to 601,730. And remember, just like last time, just like at the beginning of the book, the Levites as a tribe were counted separately. So the Levites specifically came out to 23,000. So how many Israelites? 601,730. And how many Levites? 23,000. Then the next part of the Torah portion mentions a little problem. Okay, so God had commanded that the land of Israel would be distributed among the men of each tribe. But what about the families that only had daughters? Well, here we find out about there was a family from the tribe of Manasseh with 5 sisters, Machla, Noah, Charla, Milcah, and Tirza. And they asked Moses about their right. Um, well, their father actually, these 5 girls, they had a dad who died, and he didn't have any sons. He only had girls. So they went up to Moses to ask about why they should lose the right to their land just because there wasn't a guy in their family. The Midrash says that these girls were very humble. They respectfully approached Moses with this problem. Okay, remember that Moses is no stranger to problems, but the way that people approach him is just so rude. Like, come on, we're all just trying to figure this out together. But no, these girls it was more like of a change of tone really for Moses. Like, wow, they're asking me something respectfully. Well, Moses actually didn't even know the answer. So he went to ask God about what should be done. And what did God say? God said, hey, the girls are right. They deserve their land. The rabbis say that this part of the Torah shows that the women of this generation loved the land so much that they didn't want to miss out on any of it. Okay, so they weren't just passengers, they weren't just, side characters. No, no, they wanted to be included in this promise of the land. And this is a reason why the woman, according to the Midrash, the women and the children weren't punished in the desert and they were allowed to enter the land. So when we talk about who entered the promised land, it was the men that died in the desert, but the women and the children were allowed in. So, the last part of this chapter details the commissioning of Joshua. So Moses was being prepared to go up to the mountain where he was going to die, but before his death, he had to appoint a new leader to replace him. And Hashem chose Joshua to replace Moses. And the sages explained that it's because Joshua was Moses' most humble student. Okay, Joshua was said to be, in this sort of Jewish tradition, it said that they had what was today it's called a yeshiva, which is basically a study academy where you go to learn Torah, and that they had that in that time. It's anachronistic, but don't question it. It's just tradition. So Moses had his houses of studies, right? And that Joshua was always the first person to arrive at the study sessions in the morning, and he would be there to distribute all the chairs, all the places to sit, all the the material that people would need to study, and that he was also the last person to leave at night after cleaning up everything. He arranged everything and he served wholeheartedly with strength. And he became a great Torah teacher and was now being rewarded for all his hard work. Now he was being rewarded with leadership. The Midrash explains that when Moses gave the news to Joshua, hey, buddy, you're going to be the new leader, Joshua immediately refused. He was like, Moses, it can't be me. He said he didn't feel worthy. He didn't deserve to be king. He was a humble person, which, as the rabbis say, was exactly the reason why he deserved to lead the people. Then the final part of this week's Torah portion goes over the Moadim, which, if you remember Parsha Emor back in the book of Leviticus, the Moadim are the appointed times. These are the special holidays in the biblical calendar. And this chapter specifically tells us about the appropriate offerings to give during these appointed times. And every day there were offerings in the temple, and later in the in the tabernacle, and then later on in the temple. But on holidays, there were extra offerings that were particularly special and extra for the holiday. So these are the highlighted festivals or appointed times that I want to bring to your attention with their corresponding dates. The first one is Shabbat, which is the weekly rest. It's every seventh day of the week. Next is Rosh Chodesh, which is the new moon, and this is the first day of every single month. Then it's Pesach, which is the Passover. We know that's on the 14th of Nisan. This is the first month in the biblical calendar. Then it's Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks, which is on the 6th of Sivan. And Yom Teruah, which is literally the day of shofar shouts, and in Jewish tradition it's called Rosh Hashanah, which is the first of Tishrei. This is the 7th month in the biblical calendar. And then in that same month, there's two other festivals. This should be an M. Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, which is on the 10th of Tishrei, and then Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles on the 15th of Tishrei. So yeah, on this month, Tishrei, there's 3 holidays, very important holidays, very special month of the Hebrew calendar, right? So these are basically the main biblical holidays as commanded by God himself. These are days to be sanctified and made special in honor of God and his holy instruction. Now, today, obviously, the temple isn't standing, so Jewish tradition is to await and to pray for the reconstruction of the temple so that, particularly, all these sacrifices mentioned in Torah, so that we're able, well, not me, I'm a Gentile, but for Jews in Jerusalem, according to the Orthodox view, so that they can go to the temple and offer these prescribed offerings. So soon, actually, this is a good discussion, a good topic that I want to dedicate an entire lesson to, specifically on the biblical calendar in its Torah context and in Jewish tradition, to better understand these times and to, for those who follow these calendar, to be in tune with them. So until the next lesson, shalom, shalom, and Shavua Tov. Have a great week, everyone.